I am so proud to be a member of a generation that is so loud in so many ways. I just love how passionate the generation is and how values oriented the generation is. That to me is such a gift. And when employers can leverage that passion and that grit and that determination to do good, so much greatness can come from that.
This is Career Composer. I'm Erin, and I'm helping you, professionals under 30, navigate your careers with a music-themed twist. I'm giving you the job search and career advice you need to get that job, but we'll also talk about music, how to balance our personal and professional lives, and figure out what we're meant to do. Ready? Let's go. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Career Composer. My name is Erin Ahart. I'm a full-time career coach in Washington, D.C. And today we are bringing on an amazing guest, Ange Richard, to talk about the Gen Z experience navigating the world of work today. This is a career advice podcast for Gen Z by Gen Z. And there's nothing I love more than connecting you with people who just get you and understand how chaotic it can be to navigate the world of work today, while also providing you with expert career advice. As a LinkedIn top voice, founder of her business Professionally Unprofessional, and TEDx speaker, Ange Richard bridges generational gaps in the workplace as a sought-after Gen Z career coach. Currently pursuing her PhD at Boston College, she combines academic insight with practical lived experience to guide early career professionals through the complexities of today's intergenerational workforce. Ange is based in Boston, loves to spend her winters skiing and her summers hiking, and enjoys a long walk on a sunny day, because who doesn't love that? Let's welcome Ange to the podcast and prepare to feel both called out and completely understood by two career coaches who are here to support you on your career journey. Ready? Let's go. Ange, thank you so much for being here today. I am so incredibly excited to have this conversation with you. I'm excited because we are both Gen Z career experts, and it's not often that we always get to talk honestly with each other about the challenges that Gen Z faces, the strengths that we have, and these all make up the Gen Z experience in the world of work. You're not only a Gen Z career expert, but you are also an entrepreneur. You are a TEDx speaker and a LinkedIn top voice on the topic of Gen Z at work. So please help our audience get to know you a little bit better and tell us about yourself and what got you so interested in this topic of Gen Z at work.
Thank you so much for having me, Erin. I am so jazzed for our conversation. I know it's going to be a great one. You named quite a few things about me already, but I'm happy to give some more background on me. Like Erin said, my name's Ange. I am currently based in Boston. I grew up in Connecticut, so New England through and through. I'm a first generation college student. That is a huge part of my identity. And going through the career development process and exploring, what are my options? What's out there? Who do I talk to? Things like networking and social capital and all of these other concepts were pretty new to me and took a lot of adjusting and unlearning and some really frank mentors and conversations to help me even unpack what do those things mean. Being able to provide that advice, which I was able to do at college through my career center to other students and other folks who are navigating that process, was everything to me. My training is in education. Being an educator is my through line in everything that I do. Whether I am talking with you right now, whether I am writing on LinkedIn, whether I am in front of a classroom actually teaching, that is what I do. Being an educator grounds all parts of me. I'm also a PhD student right now, so I love education. I love learning. I love researching, and I have some pretty big questions about career development and the world of work that I've been diving into. And that pretty much covers me and my business, Professionally Unprofessional, another huge part of what I do. You'll see that in all of my socials and branding and content, and we'll be able to dive into that a little bit more today.
Well, thank you so much for sharing with us a little bit more about you. You have this incredible background in this really awesome space that we both get to work in, and it's so clear how much passion you have for the work we do. So really, really excited about that. And from your perspective, what are some of the biggest challenges that Gen Zers face in the working world today?
What a question, right? We see them facing many, many challenges. And I'll first start off by saying, whenever I approach, kind of generational conversations or start talking about Generation Z or millennials or Gen Xers and older folks and younger folks, there is a lot of generalizing that can happen. And that can get us to a place where we start to dismiss nuance and very specific experiences. So I just want to say, any kind of generalizing that can lead into stereotyping or just overarching maybe conceptions that lead to misconceptions, that is generally unhelpful. And so I try to stay away from that as much as I can. But I'll talk from working with Gen Z and also from what we are seeing elevated in the news and data. Something that's really challenging for Gen Zers in the world of work today is, of course, the search. There is so much nuance. There is so much that's hidden. There is so much that is just incredibly challenging to navigate, right? Whether it is a traditional job application, understanding sort of the hidden job market, so to speak, right? Where do I join these smaller communities that are really prominent in searches now? How do I establish my network? I mean, the job search itself is so hard. And we're seeing that a lot. And we're seeing in the news, the elevation of a lot of these stories from major outlets, really honing in on individual experiences. And that's something we don't see a lot of. And that to me signals really how prevalent and how scoping this experience is, right? It's not just our computer science students. It's not just environmental science majors. It's not just creative students. It is broad, right? It is ever present. It's affecting everybody. And so that is a major difficulty in the world of work. I'd say another huge challenge is those misconceptions I was talking about, right? These perceived maybe challenges or difficulties that hiring a Gen Z candidate presents to your team, and just general misconceptions about the generation, right? We hear from employers and sources, maybe clickbait, maybe not, quite often about how challenging Gen Z is to work with. And if an employer could go back on their decision, they'd never hire a Gen Z candidate again. And just all of this very negative connotation and, talk about the generation. And when I see those headlines or I see those stories elevated, it makes me really sad and kind of devastated for how companies are really limiting the potential of the generation and what could be if they were better integrated across their intergenerational teams. Because we know Generation Z is incredibly educated. They're incredibly eager. They want to communicate better. They want to collaborate better. And in fact, they rank their communication and collaboration and teamwork pretty high, whereas employers are hoping to see them as more technically savvy and to have more equity and inclusion embedded in their practice. So there's a big mismatch between what employers are thinking and wanting and what Gen Z is thinking and wanting, not just in those workplace characteristics, but also values as well. So that is huge. And one more that I'll name, and I think is causing a lot of conversation among Gen Z, but also a lot of difference, is just what does career mean these days, right? In a start to the world of work that is so potentially disruptive or damaging, or let's say it takes you a year post-grad until you find your first job, those ramifications and those effects are significant. How are you to trust the world of work? How are you to feel secure in your 9 to 5? How are you even able to think about what the next thing is when for so long you've just had to put one foot in front of the other? So I think about this a lot. And, whether a Gen Zer is interested in career lily padding or not moving up the corporate ladder, or they want a more linear career, how do we make sense of all of this when the entry has been so difficult for so many? I think kind of like the pandemic introduced some delay into internships and other hardships when it comes to experiential learning and getting a job, kind of post-pandemic. What about the difficulty of entering the world of work? Like, what kinds of those ramifications are we going to see as Gen Z steps into management positions, right? As we become even more surrounded by Gen Z colleagues, right? We're going to make up 35% of the world of work by 2030. What's that going to look like? Those are a few challenges. Those are a few things I think about a lot. Could keep going, but I'll leave it there.
And I agree with you on every single point that you brought up. You touched on so many important aspects of our experience just in a couple of minutes. So I really appreciate that. I have a friend who it took her exactly 1 year to get a job post college. She went to a college that had an amazing reputation. And then it was so difficult for her after being involved in all of these extracurriculars, after networking and seeing so much success during her college experience. You also mentioned the negative perceptions and misconceptions that we deal with. Something else you brought up was expectations. And I think if I were to name probably the number one challenge that I see Gen Z face, it's those conflicting expectations. One of my favorite movies is the Barbie movie. And there's this monologue. I know I'm not alone in that. I know so many people love that movie, but there's this monologue by America Ferrera, and she talks about how it's literally impossible to be a woman. She hits on so many great things in that monologue. And similarly, I think it's literally impossible to be a Gen Zer in the world of work today because employers have these big expectations for us to bring in these big, exciting new ideas to elevate the world of work, to be tech savvy. And we are all of those things. But at the same time, they expect us to adhere to outdated professional norms that we never grew up with, that we never experienced. And so when a future supervisor or boss is wondering, why didn't you follow up after this meeting with action items and a thank you note? We don't know that we were ever supposed to do that because no one's taught us. And that is just one really tiny example of what I mean by these expectations.
But a very important one, and really highlights the potential disparity in the spectrum of how folks are coming into the world of work and what kinds of knowledge, experiences, everything that makes them them. I really try to emphasize with the teams that I speak with, we can read headlines all day. We can take a look at data all day long. We can think about how we conceptualize the generation, but think about your hires and your specific team. Pay very close attention to and invest in pouring into them, building them up. How do you want them to be positive contributors? Because those are the ones that matter for you the most right now. Let's get rid of these cloudy, headlines and clickbait titles and things that say, Gen Z brings their parents to interviews, which I've heard from many recruiters, they have never witnessed a parent on an interview. So, but anyway, all to say, good points.
So given these issues that you just mentioned, so many Gen Zers who are just starting out in their careers are struggling to make this transition from school into the world of work. What else can you tell us about this school to work transition?
So the school to work transition is generally conceptualized as this, period of going from graduation to employment. Some folks may have a very smooth school to work transition, and that could be individually defined or more broadly defined, right? We may factor in things like decent work. A lot of folks struggle with underemployment, not getting paid enough based on their education, many factors, but generally it's conceptualized as leaving school, graduation, some kind of certificate, some kind of training is completed, entering the world of work. That transition can be super complex, right? You mentioned your friend who it took a year to find her first post-grad job. For me, I did have a job just around the time that I graduated from college. I think I had just accepted my offer maybe 2 days before graduation. But up until that point, was I stressed? Oh my gosh, I was, so panicked about, what is my value? Was school worth it? What do I do if I don't find something? And then that was, 4 years ago now, exacerbated to today's competitive market and how many positions are being impacted and affected by a variety of factors. It's just, there's so much negativity that can happen in the school to work transition. There are so many adverse experiences that can happen. We're seeing it all the time, and it really is devastating. I'm currently doing a systematic literature review in my PhD about the school to work transition. And I actually got to talk to a very prominent scholar whose theory and work directly is related to that school to work transition. And I'm interested in understanding how do a variety of factors, right? Whether contextual or situational, whether identity-based, right? Like race, class, gender, et cetera. How do those factor into this transition process? What are the mediators? What are the moderators? What are the effects? What are the impacts? And how can we use that to have better conversations between our schools, our colleges, our vocational training centers, and the world of work? how can we get employers and colleges especially to communicate better? So the school to work transition can bring about so much positivity and success and empowerment. It can also bring about really strong feelings of not being enough, imposter syndrome, just general negativity, stress. It's very complex.
Yeah, that's so interesting. And thank you so much for bringing that up. Something else that I wanted to get your opinion on, and I was debating asking this question because I find that colleges are so helpful and getting advanced education is such an important part of not just getting a job and being prepared for work, but also being a well-rounded, educated individual operating in the world that we live in. While I believe in education very strongly, I think a lot of people and clients who I've worked with think that they were sold a lie because it's so difficult to get a job. There are so many people, whether they've been told this by friends, family, the colleges and universities themselves, that if they work hard, get an internship, and get into an okay college, that they will get an amazing job. They think it's a guarantee, and it's just not. Even getting a job not at one of those companies that everyone's targeting is still so difficult. So what's your take on that?
You had to ask. No, my overarching take, and I actually made a video about this a few months ago. My overarching take is education, learning, skill development of any kind, training of any kind is never a scam. What can be a scam is the high cost of a college education and expecting that to yield a very specific return on your investment. That's what's feeling like a scam right now, is this ROI question of college and work. The results aren't quite matching the investment that's made. That's what's feeling like a scam. But I'm a firm believer in, again, education, learning, immersing yourself in communities with other critical thinkers. That is never a scam. And when we start encroaching on that territory, we're in trouble. When we start saying that learning or any kind of training is a scam, that makes me prickle. But yeah, some of our systems right now are incredibly flawed. And there are many students who unfortunately are in mountains of debt or who studied in degrees or majors that are not giving them the returns that they expected or were promised. And they have every right to be disgruntled and upset because it's devastating. However, could you go to college for cheaper and maybe alter your situation? 100%. Could you participate in some vocational training? 100%, right? So there's a lot of nuance there. Again, all this is super nuanced, but learning and education and skill building is never a scam. What's feeling like a scam is the path of college to career to work. And that's really unfortunate.
Yeah, that's a really great distinction. And I completely agree with you there. So when someone does finally get their first full-time role, all of this hard work, their education has paid off, they're so excited, and then they find that adjustment is really tough. What makes those first 90 days in particular of your first full-time job so difficult?
Those first 90 days are critical to your success in that job. I firmly believe that. It's critical to your own self-development, professional development, what you want to get out of it, but it's also critical for your team having an idea of you and understanding you as a colleague, a contributor, a leader, a potential manager, all of these things. Those first 90 days, very disruptive to your everyday routine, right? You're adjusting to this new environment, this new climate. I would make every effort to communicate, to be transparent, to understand work styles, to get the best lay of the land, if you want to call it. I would do everything you can to be in the best position to understand what's going on around you. That investment and taking that time also shows very well and reads very well to your manager, to others around you, to other leaders around you. Just any kind of very concentrated, pointed investment in being your best self as a contributor, but also as being a really great team player is paramount. And that is really difficult. It is super difficult to get to know new people, know new skills, learn new tasks. start to kind of understand processes, dive into work yourself, shadow, be reverse shadowed. I mean, there's a lot that can be thrown at you. And if you don't have a great onboarding process, or you have a manager that's not that supportive, or a team that's just kind of there, well, there's a whole other layer of an unfortunate experience. So I encourage everybody, during those first 90 days, tap into your mentors, tap into your challenge network, bring that community in. And if you start to struggle, nip it as quick as you can and find ways to still be successful. Whether that is, having a conversation with your manager, talking to your mentor about things that you need to work through, talking with them about some feedback you've gotten, just bring in your community. And I totally see you and hear you that those first 90 days are incredibly challenging. You're learning so much. You're being exposed to so much. You're having to figure so many things out. Also give yourself some grace in that process, because it's not an easy adventure by any stretch.
What are some other things that Gen Zers can do in those first 90 days to make a great first impression?
Well, I am a really big fan of transparency and talking about how I work with others. I actually did this in my first job when I moved to Boston. I created this working with Ange document, and I kind of waffled, do I share it with my whole team? Do I share it with one person? How do I communicate about this? And I sent it to my whole team. And to my very comforting surprise, our executive director made hers and sent hers back. I had colleagues who I would not have expected to fill that out, knowing what I had known by that point about them. They filled it out. So it was just a great, okay, I'm encouraging transparency. I'm also sharing how I work best and what, collaboration and teamwork and working together looks like for me. And then I also get to know that about my colleagues. So I can be a better colleague. I can be a better team player. I can be a better collaborator. That was absolutely amazing. I encourage everyone to the best that you can. And of course, team structures and dynamics may limit that. But at least in your manager, one-on-one relationship, try to have that. Try to do that. On your most close team, try to have that understanding of each other. I would also suggest from day one, you write down every single professional development opportunity you engage in, everything you learn, every deliverable you have, every achievement. I'm talking everything, because once that review period comes around and you need to be advocating for yourself, you want to talk about promotion. If you're not bringing your evidence with you, you might not have the strongest case. Document everything. And then I think that also encourages you as a employee to want to do better, right? You're cataloging all these achievements, these experiences. Not only is it good for your team, but it's great for you. And you get to be more introspective and intentional about, what skill do I really need to work on here? Or what's an added skill I want to add to my toolkit? What's something I'm doing more of than I thought I would and that I need to peel back on? You can start to ask all of those conversations to yourself, to your manager, with your mentors. And I think it's just a great exercise in self-development and also accountability and thinking about your career growth.
Yeah. We might have to have another conversation about the art of the biannual review, because that's another skill that I wouldn't have been able to develop if I didn't have a great manager in my first full-time role.
Managers make a huge difference. And unfortunately, if you're in a position where you need to do a lot of the advocating, I want to be able to help you. It's possible, but it does take some of that extra effort and intentionality. And if you have to take it into your own hands, let's get you the tools to do so. So I would love to have that conversation.
Awesome. And I absolutely loved the getting to know Ange document, because not only are you sharing with others what they can expect from you, you're helping them understand your work style so they know, oh, now I see how Ange handled that meeting. I really understand why she has that approach. But you're also helping to build community within the workplace, because you're showing others that you care about getting to know them. And that doesn't just have to be a document. It could be as simple as scheduling a one-on-one meeting with everyone in your immediate team within your first month to have those conversations personally.
Yeah, absolutely. And honestly, that document at first was more for me, but it ended up being for everyone else, right? For the team. And I loved that. I absolutely loved that. It was, if I could recommend one thing, it is definitely the working with document. It's super helpful.
If you're a Gen Z professional looking for answers to your career questions, this is for you. I'm launching a new series on Career Composer called Ask Erin, where you can call in and get free personalized career advice in exchange for sharing your story on the podcast. No question is too big or too small and can help someone else who's probably wondering the same exact thing. And you can stay anonymous. Email careercomposerpodcast@gmail.com to get started. Just use the words Ask Erin in the subject line. If you have a question but don't want to come on the podcast, you can still email me at careercomposerpodcast@gmail.com, and I might just answer your question in a future episode. Let's get back into it. You mentioned communication, you mentioned being a team player, and that really leads into our next topic of discussion. A key part of your research and expertise is intergenerational collaboration. So, how can we foster greater intergenerational collaboration and harmony in the workplace?
I love this question because I think it really is so simple and we're not ready to do it. And it is simply communication. Like, of course, structured communication, right? You need to have the tools and the understanding of if this conversation is going to be difficult, how do I do it? But starting with very productive, intentional communication before things reach a head or a boiling point or what have you, that dispels so much potential for harm, for bias, for misunderstandings, for misconceptions. I mean, it sounds so simple, but like truly communication. I had a conversation after a presentation that I gave last year, and this was a manager who was managing a Gen Z employee. And she told me, Ange, I'm really struggling with this employee. She asks for so much feedback. It's so burdensome to me. And I asked her, how have you, or how did you from the start set expectations with her? How did you tell her about what the team is typically doing, how you typically operate? Did you give her the laydown of those processes? And she's like, no. And I said, I would encourage that conversation. You both need to set expectations with each other. And for managers, if that means shifting what's been the norm to help accommodate one member of your team to help them be successful, which in turn helps you all be successful, I'd encourage you to get a little uncomfortable and try to bring in a new way of thinking, a new way of communicating, a different way of understanding. That makes us all better. Flexibility, adaptability, all of those things are necessary across the generations. It doesn't matter who's in the room. And it does all boil down to communication. Are we being transparent? Are we setting expectations? Are we establishing boundaries? Is everything laid out? It's that simple. To me, it's that simple.
Yeah. And I'm actually so impressed by that Gen Z employee who had the courage to ask for feedback, because they are trying to foster this communication. And that comes from a place of wanting to do a good job. Why are we upset
100%.
with that?
Erin, let me tell you. I do understand, I just as much as I may be upset with the way an older colleague is approaching something, or I think, that could be way more efficient. We are all guilty of that. And I was trying to hold space for this Gen Zer who's clearly doing her best in the only way that she knows how with her manager, and a manager who's feeling tapped and inexperienced with this and not sure of how to handle it. So I always try and approach these situations with compassion. But in this situation, it all boiled down to communication. And so trying to encourage that and trying to encourage more transparency and openness, and also admitting when you get something wrong or saying, that's not how I usually do that, but I'm really open to learning. Can you show me how I could be a better manager, colleague, et cetera, to you? I mean, that goes so far, and we'd all be so much better for it.
Absolutely. One last question, and then we're going to change the subject a little bit. Is it the responsibility of Gen Z to educate other generations on why we're valuable?
I think if we want, I think back to the quote, be the change you wish to see in the world. If we want to be, associated with positivity, with a good reputation among others in the world of work, I think there's a lot that we can do to enforce that. I don't think we should have to go to great lengths to educate or teach, But if that's in our capacity and we can identify someone needs that, all the better. I just think we can all be a little bit more, I don't know, respectful, open, have that curiosity, have that willingness to learn. I think Gen Z does a good job of that. I think older generations can do a good job of that as well, and do a good job of that in some circumstances. You know, there are some incredible intergenerational teams out there. I was on an incredible one. I am on an incredible one in my current job. I am so grateful for those colleagues who ask me questions, push me to be better. And then in turn, I get to ask them and push them and try to think of, you know, different ways to work together with them. And I don't know. I just think we could all use a little bit more openness and curiosity. And is it our responsibility? I'm not sure. But if we see an avenue for in good faith education and transparency and knowledge sharing, 100%, 100%.
And I'm not trying to ask that question from a place of, well, all other generations view Gen Z as not valuable, or we don't want to work with them, because that's just not true. It's just coming from a place of Gen Z. We have these experiences. We're curious. We want to be seen in a positive light. And
totally.
Yeah, I always say, treat others the way you want to be treated and lead by example. And leading by example in itself, you know, behave as you would want your manager to behave. And that goes into a conversation about managing up and all of these other things we could talk about.
No, I'm just saying I'm glad that you asked that. And that really made me think a little bit more deeply too about how do we position ourselves really well on our teams? How do we think about that interaction and that compatibility and coordination? There's a lot more we could dive into there. And I'm just glad you posed it, because I think we can all be really helpful. And people often like to be helpful. When people are recognized and seen in that way psychologically, they feel really confident. They feel really good. So I think it could be a win-win in so many ways. But I'm glad you asked that.
Awesome. Great. I love ending every Career Composer episode on a high note. So I want to know from your perspective, in the beginning of this episode, I asked you, what are some of the challenges that we face? Now I want to know, in your opinion, what makes Gen Z so amazing? And what are some wins, action steps, or takeaways that our Gen Z listeners should get from this episode today?
I am so proud to be a member of a generation that is so loud in so many ways. I'm so impressed and always inspired by the advocacy that I see, the emphasis on environmental consciousness, the emphasis on social responsibility. I mean, I just love how passionate the generation is and how values oriented the generation is. That to me is such a gift. And when employers can leverage that passion and that grit and that determination to do good, so much greatness can come from that. Like I'm so excited for what the world of work is going to continue to evolve into and look like as more Gen Zers take up space. I'm just so excited by that. I'd say overall, something that I would say to any Gen Zers who are listening, I see you, I hear you, you are capable, you are incredible. And remember that your value is not determined by a particular job title or a process that's not going so well, or, you know, some feedback you may have gotten that was adverse or challenging. You are so much more than that. And you have the opportunity to decide that next step for yourself. I hope you can have some agency in determining your path to curating that next career development opportunity, whatever it may be. I just see you and I hear you, and I love this generation. To employers or anybody who works with Gen Z, I implore you to be curious, to have an openness to learn, to have a willingness to bring in other perspectives. I guess to anybody listening, right? Be curious, be open, be communicative, be transparent. I think communication, we're always, worried about over communicating. I worry about under communicating. I would rather have it all out there and then figure out the path forward than start to assume or have some preconceived notion or think something that's just not true. Communicate, communicate, communicate. And I hope we all can have a better intergenerational workplace, because we all deserve it and we're all incredible.
You're amazing, Ange. Love that.
Back at you, Erin.
So my last question for you. This podcast has a music theme, and I love to ask every guest, because I'm obsessed with music, What is your favorite song, favorite album, and your favorite artist?
This was hard for me to think about. I have to be so honest with you, but I had to think of the song that people are probably going to make fun of me. I had to think of the song that always brings me like joy. And anytime I hear it, I will never skip it. It always makes me like happy and want to dance. Pursuit of Happiness by Kid Cudi. My friends make fun of me for this, but I love it. I love Kid Cudi. I absolutely love it. My favorite album, I love Kendrick Lamar. It was very hard for me to pick which album, but To Pimp a Butterfly has to be it. And then favorite artists, oh, I couldn't pick. I love Tame Impala. I love Mac Miller. I love music. I'm so glad you asked these questions, but I feel like I never quite hone in well. So this was a good exercise in let's name some of the greats.
Yeah, that question always stumps people because it really calls them to look back on their like 3,000 liked songs in their Spotify account. But
yes.
Yeah, my younger sister, one of her favorite songs is The Pursuit of Happiness. She showed that song to me years ago, and you're right, it still stands a test of time. It's such a happy,
I love it.
Upbeat song.
I joke all the time, like it will be played at my wedding, like that will be on the DJ list. It's not going anywhere.
Absolutely. You and I have to move on to our next recording session. And that's a hint to our listeners that Ange will be back on Career Composer in just a couple weeks. So stay tuned for that episode. But before we close, Ange, how can people get in touch with you?
People can find me at Early Career Corner on TikTok and Instagram. And if you search Ange Richard on LinkedIn, I should come up, and I look forward to connecting with you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ange. This has been such an amazing conversation, and can't wait to see you in the next episode.
Thanks for having me, Erin. Looking forward to the next one.
Thank you so much for listening. I really hope you enjoyed this conversation with Ange as much as I did. You can stay up to date on all things Career Composer by following us on Instagram and TikTok at Career Composer, or by following me on LinkedIn at Erin A. Hart. Please make sure you check out all of Ange's amazing content. She provides some really incredible insights into the world of work and how to navigate all of this chaos as young professionals. So make sure you check out her social media that she listed in the episode today. Again, thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you in the next episode. Bye.